U.S. trade officials meeting their Chinese counterparts in London to continue trade talks. The trade policy uncertainty, just one of the many layers of worries hanging overhead for the U.S. economy. For more, we're bringing in Princeton University professor Alan Blinder, former Fed vice chair. He also served as a member of President Clinton's Council of Economic Advisors. Alan, it's always great to get your perspective. I know you also recently wrote about more broadly some of the policies of the Trump administration, but I do want to get your take on trade, which of course you've also written about extensively, and sort of where we are in the trade talks and whether we could come out the other side better than when we started. What's your assessment of where we are so far?
I give long odds against that. You can pray for it, but the odds are very much against it. Look, what I tell my students every year in teaching them Economics 101 is trade wars have only losers. The little bit of truth in the Donald Trump dictum is that if you're the 800-pound gorilla on the block, you can probably make the other guy a bigger loser than you are. That is, we could lose a little, and many other countries, Canada, Mexico, many others, including China, I think, could lose more. You want to call that winning, that's winning. But to me, everybody's losing.
What do you make, Alan, of the basic argument that the Trump administration will put out there, which is, listen, they'll say, we want to reform the global trading system and put American companies on fairer, firmer ground. And when they talk about it, Alan, and I'm interested to get your take on this, they'll simply say, listen, as we sit here in June 2025, the global trading system, as it's engineered, just isn't fair anymore. It doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't make sense that we impose a 2.5% tariff on auto imports from Europe, and they hit back with a 10% import duty on us. It doesn't make sense that we put up with material non-tariff barriers like China stealing our IP. Do you disagree with that premise? Do you disagree with the tactics? Do you disagree with both, Alan?
I don't disagree with the premise, the way you put it, but it's easy to exaggerate it. I mean, we have a protective tariff against EVs, for example. We have a high tariff on trucks compared to cars. We're not completely innocent. Now, having said that, we're pretty good. We have led the world over decades in bringing tariff barriers down from where they used to be. It's kind of sad to see us leading the world up. And it's even sadder to see us saying, you know, our president saying, one day he says there'll be a 50% tariff on this or that, the next day 25, the next day 75. I mean, who in the world knows what's going on?
What about the effort to sort of reshore certain American manufacturing and other industries, Alan? I mean, we've seen companies, you know, some of them do it on their own regardless. Some of them, of course, do it with the promise of some kind of carrot from the administration. But is there value, and is it realistic to bring some of this manufacturing capacity back?
Look, don't we believe, especially with a Republican-dominated government, in letting the free market decide things like that? I mean, I mostly believe in that. There are some reasons to deviate from that. But a lot of the manufacturing jobs, first of all, weren't very good jobs, and secondly, are never coming back, no matter what we do. And thirdly, the tariffs, much of which fall on inputs that companies use to make things, are going to make things worse for many manufacturing companies in America, not better. It'll make it better for some. Look, the steel industry is happy to have protective tariffs. They've been having that on and off since the 1960s. But as I think almost everybody in America knows by now, there are a hell of a lot more steel-using jobs than steel-producing jobs. So if you look at the nation, we're not benefiting from that.
Well, but certainly, Alan, listen, we're not going to bring all manufacturing jobs back, but we would like to have a lot. We would like to retain our edge in advanced manufacturing,
sure, right?
And we would certainly, I think, like to reshore as many of those jobs as possible. We'd like to protect American IP. These are goals we have. If we agree on the goals and you disagree on the tactics of Trump, what are the smarter, more effective tactics?
Well, there may be cases where we need to try hard, and maybe that's playing hardball, to negotiate barriers in other countries down. But what's easier for us to do, as for example in the CHIPS Act under the Biden administration, is provide government incentives, subsidies if necessary, to have these critical let's call them manufacturing, although they're not all manufacturing enterprises in the United States. We don't want to be completely dependent. Look, here's a good example, chips, right? We're not completely, but we're very much dependent on Taiwan for chips. Hopefully that'll be fine. But if China makes, should barricade Taiwan, it's not an impossible thing to think about. We're going to want to have the chips at home. We saw it in COVID that we didn't have enough of all kinds of equipment at home. So for critical equipment, yeah, there is reason to keep it home, even if it's more expensive than importing it.
Alan, I want to turn to more of the subject of that op-ed I mentioned that you recently wrote in the Wall Street Journal. And this is, we talk about trade all the time here. We talk a lot about the markets. We have talked less about the situation with cuts to research at universities. Of course, the sort of battle that has been emerging between Harvard and the administration. But you talk about the economic potential, at least economic impact of those measures. So bring it home for us. What should people be watching for in that situation?
Well, I think one of the ways we've created a lot of comparative advantage for us in high-wage, high-tech industries is through the cooperation of a government, which is often making grants, businesses, which are often coming in after something that used to be experimental becomes economic to produce for a profit, and universities where the scientists are not worried about producing for a profit. They're doing basic research, some of which never will lead to goods that private companies produce for a profit, but some of which will. And the returns on that are tremendous. And the Trump administration is destroying that. It's declared war on the elite universities. It's declared war on research. Every day I read in the papers or online about some other line of research that's been eviscerated or made illegal or defunded or whatever, ruined by government action. And this is not easy to get back. If you just to take one obvious example, if you stop something that's in a drug development that's in the middle of a trial on human beings or even on animals, and you stop it, you don't just start it again a year later. You're starting from scratch. And so for however long this lasts, we're setting ourselves back. And you might say, for what reason? I don't see a reason.
Well, Alan, the reason the Trump administration gives is that you elite institutions and you, Harvard, have to stop the harassment of Jewish kids on your campus, right? And if you don't do that, if you don't take steps to do that, there will be consequences.
Does anyone on earth actually believe that?
Alan, Harvard's own internal reports show there's an issue.
No, I didn't mean that Harvard had a bad record on anti-Semitism. What I mean is that's what's actually behind the Trump attack.
So what is behind it, Alan? If it's not that, what is it?
I think it's this general attack on elites. That too many of us are Democrats. There was too much wokeness in universities. Look, this is not part of economics, but you do see it in other humanities disciplines and things like that. It doesn't bother me sitting here on the Princeton campus, but it seems to bother President Trump and the MAGA crowd. But I don't see why anybody really believes that taking a stand against anti-Semitism is what's really behind taking a stand against elite universities. And it's not just Harvard.
Well, if it was more broad out, wouldn't he be going against, wouldn't he be saying these same things about Princeton then? I don't hear him going after Princeton.
We have not, thank heaven, I don't know how long this lasts, been a primary target of the Trump invective. We have, however, had grants canceled, mostly in the sciences, but also in the humanities, where there are grants. They're small amounts compared to the sciences, but a lot of them have been zeroed out. And, and we're a major target of the so-called endowment income tax because we generate a lot of income from our endowment, which, by the way, we use to keep education cheap with financial aid for students who can't afford it. among other things. So you're right that we haven't been a principal target yet, and we're very happy that we're not. And if we never are, that'll be great. But everyone around here, or not everyone, most people around here are worried about that.
Yeah. I think, Alan, there's Americans who are plenty upset by what they've seen on some of these campuses. But I appreciate your time, as always, to hopping on the show.
You're very welcome.